Good evening and welcome back to the Tuesday Night Live podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 6, and we are currently live on YouTube, but we'll also be rolling out to Spotify and other platforms as well. That's something new for this week, so if you are listening on Spotify, we do the podcast live every week on YouTube a Tuesday night at 8 PM UK time over on my channel, CaptainGoodspeed. And tonight we are going to be talking about the European Super League, or the proposed European Super League, and we both have fairly strong views on it, I would say. And obviously my co-host Toby Jones, or TIJ, has done extensive research on it over the last couple of days, so I'm going to let him sort of introduce and set the scene on this week's topic.
Evening, folks. Hope you're all right. It's a very weird on the European Super League. It's one that's been talked about for over 25 years. But I'm going to be very boring. I'm going to talk through a lot of notes for about 2 minutes, so just hold on. And if you need me to stop at any point, tough, because I'm going to just continue and barrel on through. And I'm going to analyse the little things and look at the views of those involved, and of course the arguments for and against, and our thoughts later on. So, with the European Super League, there was a leak that came out from a German newspaper. If I pronounce this right, I get a gold star. Der Spiegel, does that sound about right? That sounds about right to me. A consultant presented the plans to Real Madrid in October of this European Super League of this year. And this noted that 16 of Europe's biggest clubs have planned to sign a letter of intent later in November this year, expressing their desire to participate in the European Super League. So the Super League that is proposed could be up and running by 2021, which could completely change the structure of the Champions League now. We don't know, neither me or Joe, I don't think anybody knows whether this would replace the Champions League or whether this would replace the domestic leagues, so the Premier League, La Liga, Liga 1, Bundesliga, etc., etc. But the league would be independent of UEFA, FA, any governing body, and it would consist of these 16 teams, which would have a group stage with 4 teams per group and a knockout round to begin in 2021. But we're not going to get too much into that because I presume if this does go ahead that there will be changes made to that. So we'll ignore that for the moment. But the most crucial bit is that according to this report made by Der Spiegel, the term sheet in the league team mail awaited signatures from the 11 founders. 11 founders, 11 teams that found the competition and established the competition, and 5 guest teams. And these 11 teams cannot be relegated for 20 years. So they are Spain's Barcelona and Real Madrid, England's Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City and Manchester United. I'll let you all work out who's omitted from there and should be there. Of course, it's Crystal Palace. Italy's Juventus and AC Milan, France's Paris Saint-Germain, and Germany's FC Bayern Munich. But a few little bits of yap about some of the clubs. Arsenal have insisted to Sky Sports News they're not a part of the plans for the Super League and remain committed to the Premier League and all other competitions. United and Liverpool, nor are Chelsea, are not commenting on their mentioning as another of those English teams involved. And the Bayern chairman, I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, Rummenigge, I'll go with Rummenigge. He's the chairman of FC Bayern, and he absolutely and clearly rejects this plan for a breakaway European Super League. So it's quite bizarre that everybody is just shutting, completely saying, no, we've got nothing to do with it. But The Sun reported a few years back that there was a meeting of the 5 big clubs, the 5 big English clubs that are involved with this. That would also back up that Spurs aren't involved in this. The 5 big clubs, they all went to a hotel, all the chairmen of these clubs, and The Sun seems to think they were talking about the breakaway European Super League. And at the end of the day, European Super League, or something of that intent, has been talked about pretty much for about 20, 25 years. Mm-hmm. It's been talked about for a long time. This isn't the first mention of this. Can we all have a little laugh at Liverpool first? Great, Jamie says in the chat. Ha, right, that's all you're getting. Old Man Sodor thinks that it's a joke, the stupid idea Super League. Again, a view, and I think a lot of fans agree with that. The UK government's come out in the last few days and said, it will hurt English football, and the remaining 15 Premier League clubs will sue the 5 clubs who, if they tried to leave before the end of the 2021-22 season. But what we don't know, and what we're going to struggle to debate this with, and look at both sides if it happens with both sides, whether it's going to replace the domestic leagues or whether it's going to replace the Champions League. But we've got views of people involved. We'll talk about our views now, But first off, Joe, I think what we were talking about earlier, A, there's no Spurs, and B, there's no Leicester. Well, Leicester have won the title, it pains me to say it, more than Liverpool. They've won it in a more recent fashion than Manchester United. They've won it more recently than Arsenal as well, your club. So why aren't Leicester in this? And I think the whole point, that's the whole point, isn't it? Why aren't teams like Leicester in this? And it will, if this happens, then it will completely take away the excitement of a team like Leicester.
Yeah, no, 100%. Thank you, Toby, for that bit of research and obviously telling everyone the ins and outs of this ESL. But yeah, I think the main thing that we have to look at is whether it's going to replace the Premier League, which was the way I read it. Sort of get rid of the domestic leagues and have this European Super League, which, you know, there's even been talks of 39th games and whatever in the Premier League where, I don't know, a Premier League team plays Barcelona or whatever for the 39th game. But, you know, yeah, I'm fine with Spurs being out of it. I think, you know, the top 5 that you speak of, not necessarily in terms of league position at the moment, are the biggest clubs in English football, and they have the biggest presence on the European stage and the worldwide stage. So I'm fine with Tottenham being out of that for now. You know, I get that Arsenal haven't won the Premier League for, it'll be 15 years coming up. So, you know, I don't know. Leicester, should they be in it? They obviously won the Premier League a couple of years ago. More recently than Man United, much more recently than Liverpool, and you know, it's a difficult one. It really is a difficult one. I think I imagine that the same debate was probably had when the Premier League came about, or, you know, these things seem to. We don't like change as fans and stuff like that, and I don't know. Playing devil's advocate here, I might be quite a fan of it if it does happen. I think it would be a lot more competitive than, because it would essentially be the European knockout stages, which are always quite exciting, and it would just be week in, week out. You know, you would have, I think they said 20 teams. Like there's a certain number of teams. Is it 15 that have signed up? Or
I think so. But ultimately, I think we'd all watch it, wouldn't we? We'd all say, exactly. It's crap and we're not watching it. But ultimately, as football fans, if your club was in it, you'd watch it. That we're fools. And I think there was a good quote. I can't remember who it's by. It might be in my notes. But a disadvantage to this, we're all fools and we'd watch it. But we would just keep watching it and watching it and watching it until the Super League got that small that it was just Barcelona playing Real Madrid 38 games a year. And we'd still watch it. That's how stupid Liverpool fans... I didn't just say that. That's how stupid football fans are. How dare I just criticise my own club. And that's an interesting thing. Although revenues are big in this country for football, there's just been new deals signed. The likes of Amazon are getting involved now. We have got a massive football deal. It's in excess of 26.1 billion. Actually, that's the last deal. So even more than that in the next deal, which is very, very frightening. Premier League clubs made more than £1 billion in the last few years, and that's just in one financial year. But the finances aren't as great in other countries. And I think that this European Super League is possibly born on the success of the Premier League. The Premier League is the only competition, I'd say, out of the big 5 now that's ultimately competitive. Because what happens in France, Germany and Italy, there's only really one team. 2 if you want to be, 2 if you want to look at it, 3 if you want to look at it really. But Spain, there's always that one. But in France, Germany and Italy, you've pretty much got one team that wins it. You obviously have one team that wins it. That's the way a league works. And in Spain, there's always that runaway team. We don't really get title fights between Barca and Real Madrid particularly now, I don't feel. But El Clasico is still a massive game. If we could combine El Clasico with the Merseyside derby with, obviously Everton aren't in there, but maybe the Manchester derby, the North London derby, But the problem is with that, do Spanish fans care about the North London derby? I feel like El Clasico is possibly the biggest one. It is the biggest one in the world.
I thought the Old Firm derby was the Tyne and Weir derby.
It's only because Cautious Pause in the YouTube chat that you said that. Would you rather there be a European Super League and Hartley stays at Toro Rosso, or Hannard moves to Toro Rosso and we keep the current format, says Pete11377 in the YouTube chat? I'll have Hannard at Toro Rosso. I just think it'd be brilliant to see you crashing. Obviously, I want you to get hurt, of course, but it would be nice to see you driving for Toro Rosso and trying to see you learn Italian because, of course, you're a seasoned Italian having to reside there for a week, weren't you? Yeah, exactly. And he's driven around Imola on a simulator, so he's fully seasoned. So, Franz Tost, give him a ring. But back to European Super League. It is an interesting idea, and as I've just said, we are mugs. We would watch it, but it would massively harm. We don't know if it's going to replace the Champions League. Personally, if you replace the Champions League, it's a good idea. If it replaces the Champions League, it doesn't affect things so much. Because effectively it's just a refined version of the Champions League.
Yeah, and it gets rid of all the, teams that shouldn't be in the... Well, shouldn't be is a strong way of saying it, but teams that have got absolutely no chance of winning the Champions League,
exactly.
such as Celtic.
At least with the domestic, league, anyone can win. But with the Champions League, ultimately, 99 times out of 100, quality shines through.
Well, it's down to about 8 teams, isn't it? Max, maybe even 3 or 4. But... And
even now with this European Super League, there's 15 teams. So there's going to be 5 or 6 teams who might not have a chance of winning it. In fact, I had a look at an article earlier that was looking at I don't know how they worked it out, but they were looking at the probabilities. I haven't got the article to hand, but the probabilities of different clubs winning it. And I think for 5 clubs, there was basically 0.1% chance of them getting to the final. Mm-hmm. So that's the question. Why would they sign up if they're not going to win? Is it for the money? Because if it's for that, then that's greedy, especially for the Premier League clubs. But you can argue that it's a lot about money these days. And unfortunately, since the likes of Abramovich took over, the likes of the United started to spend money, then football has become possibly all about money.
Yeah, well, it is a business now, and I think it's the same with everything. It's the same with Formula One. People talk about pay drivers and stuff like that, and these things are expensive, and they are businesses, and to pay players' wages and to get the best players at your club, you need money, and to get money, you need either prize money or you need TV revenue, and where the TV going to go? Are they going to go to a Champions League where you've got Barcelona versus, Tel Aviv for the first 6 months of the year? Or are they going to go for a European Super League, which for most of the year is going to be such as Barcelona versus Manchester United, Arsenal versus PSG, which Arsenal PSG would be a relatively small match in the European Super League, but would still be a massive match in the Champions League right now. So, football's a business at the end of the day, and that's where they're going to get the money from. Now, going back to what we were saying before, is it going to replace the Premier League, or as Arsene Wenger said, I think, in your notes, Toby spoke to him personally. He was saying he was saying that Premier League games could be played in midweek with the ESL games at the weekend or whatever.
Whilst I can possibly see, I don't know. I can get that because I suppose fans do it, but I'll ask you all in the YouTube chat. I'm not quite sure. Would fans rather fly out in midweek and go and watch a match? Because obviously in the European Super League, the majority of games are going to be overseas, unless you're playing at home. But it's going to affect somebody. Would you fly out to another nation in the week or at the weekend? Possibly the weekend. That makes more sense. Yeah. So I get what Wenger's saying there.
Yeah.
But surely, if these 11 founder clubs, which I'll just remind you of who they are, 5 English clubs, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, City and United, Barca, Real, Juventus and AC Milan. I find AC Milan a little bit bizarre. France's PSG and Germany's Bayern Munich. If it's just those 11 clubs for 20 years and 5 guest teams, there's just no measurement of success, is there? Because
Yeah.
and fans are going to get bored eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that if, say, Liverpool don't win it for 10 years, what stops them pulling out of the European Super League?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know it sounds daft, but possibly they might need to sign more players. That the registration rules might have to become a bit less tight because of you're going to be having to obviously play, no disrespect to the Premier League, but you're going to have to be playing every week a European Super League game and a Premier League game. And as I know it sounds daft, but in Football Manager, the rotation of players is so hard when you're playing the midweek game and a weekend game. But then you can argue that Championship clubs do that all the time. But it is on a bigger scale. You're flying in between countries, and I don't know quite how that would work. There would have to be a massive changes, but I don't think it could replace the domestic league, because how would that work then? Especially for the Premier League, because you're going to have the likes of, well, cautious Paul in the chat saying, the fact you find AC Milan bizarre and not Man City shows everything wrong with modern football. But surely it should be the 11 biggest clubs in modern football. It should be those that are winning. So don't put Liverpool in then, I suppose, if you're putting that idea in. But what have AC Milan done in the last 10 years?
Yeah, but equally they're, up there with the amount of Champions League victories they've had. AC Milan are still a big presence in world football. I think if you were going to Italy and had a list of teams to see, AC Milan would probably be one of them. Do you know what I mean? I like thinking of world football and the presence of AC Milan over somebody like Fiorentina, for example. AC Milan. It's very much like the Premier League when Manchester United are struggling, but they're still probably the biggest household name in Britain of a successful football team. Do you get what I mean?
You open a big can of worms with all, don't you? Because clubs are all of a sudden going to go, well, why aren't we in it? The likes of perhaps a Napoli or Dortmund, why aren't we in it? We've won the leagues. Dortmund only won the league a few years ago. Why aren't we in it?
Yeah.
You're going to open a massive can of worms, and it very much brings it down to money because, the likes of Man City and Chelsea, of course, Paul's absolutely right in the chat that City didn't do a lot in the 70 years before that. And unfortunately, this European Super League will come down to money. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. It will come down to money because I would presume, I don't know exactly, but let's say 16 of the 20 biggest clubs in the world in terms of finances, not in terms of fan base potentially, in terms of their finances. Because of course, as Paul knows, Hibernian and Hearts are the two biggest clubs in the world. But because it's 16 of the biggest 20, again, it promotes that money idea, which I know football's a business. I get that. But I think a lot of fans would be in opposition. I wouldn't want to watch Liverpool play a European team every week. I don't see the point of it. I don't like the fact, and it just seems a bit silly. Like Jurgen Klopp said, of course, I rang him up as well. Fewer games and more money. It seems daft. He was joking in that you play fewer games and players aren't getting as many games. And you open this whole can of worms that it's going to be independent of any governing body. All the players that might be in the European Super League will be banned from the World Cup. That's the extremes. They'll be banned from the World Cup. They'll be banned from every other competition.
But there'll be some sort of compromise with that. A bit like Brexit. Do you know what I mean?
Let's not talk about Brexit. I'll say that till later. But we'll leave that till we're off air. But what's the process when a player leaves the European Super League and goes elsewhere? I feel like we've almost got a sense of isolation, and we've got the European Super League teams and everyone else. Mm-hmm. And what's going to happen when a team enters European Super League? Because if they're still playing their domestic league, if, I don't know, we go from 5 English clubs to 2, then why should every other game have to happen midweek just because you've got 2 other clubs in another competition? You look at the likes of the Club World Cup. United played in that, didn't they? They just missed 3 or 4 games. It didn't affect anybody else. That possibly might be the way to go.
Well, all the Champions League winners actually play in the Club World Cup. That's the whole idea of the Club World Cup. It's all the Champions League winners. But
again, who cares about that? That never took off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's more of a.
It's more of a statement. If I don't know that. the so-called 11 biggest clubs in Europe move to this thing. And I don't know, I was thinking of something, that these 5 guest clubs, perhaps you could have a system where they integrate the ESL with the current domestic leagues and the champions of each of the leagues. So say Tottenham win the Premier League, which they probably would if those 5 leave. And then, you know, Atletico win La Liga, Dortmund win Bundesliga, and Napoli win in Serie A. Then perhaps they're the teams that become the guests, if you get me. And then you've got that sort of incentive to play well in your domestic league kind of thing. And
I think the fundamental problem is that this would ruin the Premier League. The only one of the big 5 that arguably is competitive. Yeah. As I've said before, this has been modelled on the success of the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
And it would ruin the Premier League. It would ruin every league around the world, because at the moment in the Premier League, you've got the likes of Bournemouth in 6th. We've had Leicester win the league before. We've had a My Football Manager 2019 side, Brighton finishing 4th, which I was a bit surprised at, and then finished 15th the year after. But nonetheless, taking this domestic thing away or putting teams in the Europe, we don't know how it's going to work. We're only trying to work it out, and I would hate it to happen, because it just completely changes football. It would make it a hell of a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
It would really weaken. It would mean that the cream of the crop rise to the top, those 2 or 3. And I like that analogy about Real Madrid and Barcelona. You'd get more, I suppose, choosy about the teams that are in this European Super League. Because if one got relegated, I don't know, say if Liverpool, because Liverpool only under Klopp in the last few years have really come to fruition again. If we sacked him and bought Roy Hodgson, no offence to Roy Hodgson, but he probably wouldn't be able to play the sort of football that Klopp does.
Mm.
And we'd probably go down the pots a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd be out of the European Super League,
mm-hmm.
and clubs would be paying to get managers in and paying to get footballers in to get them back into the competition because it's worth more. And that's not what we need in the Premier League. We've already got enough of teams flashing money about, the likes of Manchester United, Mourinho,
mm-hmm.
the most overrated manager in the world, but I'm sure we'll come on to that in another one of our Tuesday Night Live podcasts at some point. But there's already enough money spending. What's the point of putting more money into it? It just seems daft, because you will make clubs bankrupt. And these names, Liverpool's, Manchester United, I know there's a hell of a lot of names, but in the English game, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, you know, the likes of these clubs, absolutely clubs that have been there since the start and have achieved regularly throughout. Are you risking bankrupting these clubs just for the sake of more money for a European Super League?
I think the idea, though, is that these clubs would actually be better off, because...
Yeah, but they wouldn't be better off, would they?
They're getting a bigger slice of the pie kind of thing, I think is the idea.
You've always got someone who's greedy who will try and exploit that. It's business, as you say. There will always be someone, like Paul says in the chat, I don't trust these owners as far as I can throw them, because they are rich businessmen, and I like to think that a lot of businessmen are people that like to exploit things. They're driven by money. They're not good people, ultimately, and don't give monkeys about it. Paul Love beautifully puts in the chat, and you know, it's wrong. It would just, as you say with the Leicester thing, Leicester, well, why shouldn't we been there? And it could genuinely muck up football as itself. And we've obviously got the arguments for. The biggest argument for is that all the other leagues are a bit mucked up. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern, Juve, and PSG have won 18 of the 20 titles in the last 5 seasons between them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But we've got a few quotes here that are against it. We've got Miss Melissa Reddy, who is Joe's senior football correspondent, basically saying that it's trying to make the rich richer, which creates a bigger divide than it already is. The likes of Bournemouth, Huddersfield, they won't be able to do it under the odds and against all the odds. It would be a world without Liverpool against Everton and Arsenal against Tottenham. And if you take that abroad, then you're looking at no Roma against Lazio. And you've tried telling that to those Roma and Lazio fans. This is Adam Crafton from the
you would still have that, because they wouldn't be in the Super League. So
Roma, I think, would be. Roma are
possibly
one of the guest teams, I think.
Yeah, perhaps. But I don't know.
But
I feel
as
like
we- as I've
they're
said
not as
earlier-
strong. Do you know what I
As
mean?
I've said earlier, the problem is that people would watch it and the people would cover it. But if you look, this is again Crafton, if you look at the German league and the Italian league, the respective teams, Bayern and Juventus, have dominated that for the last 7 or 8 years, and the Premier League is the great exception. However, an interesting one from the Times I'd like to talk about a little bit. Maybe you can respond to this. I'll just say this one line. It's a very good. It was a headline from the Times, and I thought it's not a quote, but I'll put it in. It's brilliant. Manchester City, Chelsea, Liverpool, 83 points. The bottom half of the table, 82. That's so far this season. Discuss.
What? So are we saying that the top 3 between them have got 83 points, and
Yeah.
the other 17 have
so the top
got
3
82
have got more
points?
than the bottom half combined.
Oh, the bottom half. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that for me is a reason for doing this sort of European Super League. How many? We have really only got a top 6, apart from anomaly years such as Leicester. And that for me is, it's a little bit like having Williams in Formula 1. They're not really contributing anything to it, are they? Do you know what I mean? Like, the other 14 teams don't really have a chance of winning the Premier League, and they'll probably get beaten by the top 6. Yes, you get weekends where they win them. Yes, you can have a Burnley like last season where they finished 7th. Which is fine, but from and then you translate that to the other leagues in the world, and as you say, most leagues have got one dominant team, maybe 2, possibly 3, but it's not competitive, and I think it just that stat shows it all, really. 83 points for 3 teams as opposed to 82 points for 10 teams. Now, there's not much you can do about that, because that's the way the point system works in football, but there's just such a gulf in quality between the ultimate European boys and the teams at the bottom.
There is, but surely, would you want to solve that or not?
I don't think it can be.
Because I think, well, fair enough, but...
Because how do you make it so that you've got 20 equal teams in the Premier League?
Transfer budget caps.
But even that wouldn't, because there's there's investment in infrastructure.
If you had budget caps, then you would effectively cap what the rich can do. Because what happens is, a small team goes for a player, the big team outbids them, the big team gets them. I suppose you could say that the problem with a budget cap is, well, everyone's going to go for the same budget and the player will pick the biggest team.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And also, you get round the problem where teams know how much you've got to spend, therefore can just reject everything, like...
True, but I do think that there needs to be... What needs to be solved is the golfing teams rather than making the rich richer.
I agree with that, but like purely from a footballing standpoint and a business standpoint, I can see why this European Super League would be a better option, for the teams in question.
But that's for one thing, isn't it? Money, and for their best interests.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's for ultimately, and completely disregards the hundreds of teams that are in their infrastructures, in their league infrastructures, their domestic infrastructures. I think that the Premier League's fine. The Premier League is the exception. But what needs to happen is there's a massive gulf in the likes of the French League, I think. The French League is just, well, there's no competition at all. There's maybe 4 or 5 teams that come in that. I genuinely think with the Prem, there is 10 teams that can win that. Not obviously, 4 of them teams aren't going to have a chance. But what stops Everton, Watford, Leicester, I'm struggling for another one, maybe Burnley after their season last year, rising to the top and just doing it consistently? Money. That's what stops them doing it. Whereas money, has allowed the likes of your Man Cities, who, cautious Paul said, have done nothing for the last 70 years. They got new owners. They've spent the money and they've gone and won the leagues. What have Wolves done? New owners, spent the money, they're coming back up the leagues. It's all about money, and it's not going to change. It isn't going to change, and I'm not giving a solution because I don't know how we solve it. But from a footballing standpoint, and cautious Paul again, stop us disrespecting other leagues. And I'm going to do an even worse one now. I couldn't care less about European football. I couldn't care less about the other leagues. I care about the English league. I care about the Premier League, the Championship, etc., etc. Because the Premier League is the best league in the world, hands down. And it's the best league in the world because of its competition, the fact that anybody can beat anyone, and it's possibly the morale and the mentality of clubs, I'd say. Mm-hmm. You know, in Spain, Barcelona turn up at Elba or Eibar. And, but, you know, Eibar go, we've lost already. But, in fact, is it just the English standpoint? Because I know it sounds ridiculous. South Shields could go and play Liverpool in the FA Cup and potentially win. Do you know what I mean? Well, but that wouldn't happen anywhere else. Is it the amount of giant killing we see on a regular basis, I think, you know, in the FA Cup, in the leagues, that makes the English game better than any of the others in Europe, would you say?
Yeah, but I think that giant killings probably do happen in other leagues. It's just we don't hear it.
But not as regularly.
But how do you know that? Do you know, I mean, do you think that somebody sitting in France that supports Madrid hears about Oldham beating Liverpool in the FA Cup? I don't think they do. Do you know what I mean? And equally, I don't think we would hear if, say, Borussia Mönchengladbach were beaten by a 7th tier side in Germany.
I don't know.
I don't think we would. The fact that I've never ever seen it. The football is the same wherever you play it. You know, giant killings can happen in any given match in any league in the world. You know, it's just so happens that we actually find out about it here because, I don't know, people live for it, don't they? You know, people love a good old giant killing unless you're a fan of the club that's been killed. But, you know... we got some criticism from cautious Paul in the chat there towards what Toby's saying, but yeah, exactly. 3 teams currently unbeaten at the top of the league, and City thumping team 6-1. Yeah, you know. This is the media hype and Sky TV spin in a nutshell, along with English British elitism. It's but yeah, 100%. I agree with that, Paul. I think the Premier League is the most competitive league in Europe at the moment in terms of how many teams can possibly win it. I don't agree that 10 teams can win it. I think that's a load of rubbish. Barely 6 teams can win it. You're probably looking at 4, realistically. We all big up the top 6 because they're so far ahead of 7th, but really, do you expect the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal to be... And Man United have shown that they're not going to win the title this season.
Yeah, because they've got Mourinho in charge.
It's not because they've got Mourinho in charge. It's because Mourinho they've had a bad season.
With any other manager, Man United would be walking the league. Man United have got the best squad in the league, hands down. Some of the players that Manchester United have got, Pogba could be the best player in the world, but Mourinho doesn't know how to play him. Simple. If anybody else was there, anybody with a bit of a brain, and anybody that doesn't spit his dummy out whenever they start losing, would be brilliant. You imagine somebody anybody at Manchester United other than stupid Mourinho, who plays part of the bus every week and we get a jammy win against Bournemouth, who outplay them.
Mm-hmm. I agree with what Paul says in the chat about the Premier League perhaps being the most competitive top division in Europe.
How is Barcelona beating a team 6-0 every week more exciting than the Premier League?
I don't know. Does that actually happen?
We have the odd beating. We have the odd beating in the Premier League, but that's only really started happening this season with City.
But it happens every year. Man United did it 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You know, it happens every year.
But it's not every week. It's not every week.
It isn't in Spain. It is. It isn't.
It is.
It isn't. Please go and find Barcelona's results this season and read through them, because I do not believe that every week they've won by more than 4 goals. I think that's a little bit over the top. They aren't you sponge. Yeah, I disagree with your Man United comment. I think Mourinho has actually proved that he is a successful manager. He's won in multiple leagues. He's won the Champions League multiple times, and he's achieved as much as anyone in his generation, really. So
not spending as much money as anybody else.
But that's not what we're discussing here. Do you know what I mean? We are getting massively off topic, I think. But and I think that the Premier League, as you say, the top 6 are, funnily enough, owned by the richest owners in the Premier League. But then you look at somebody like a West Ham or a Newcastle, who've got rich owners in their own right, and they don't do it. Is it stuff like I think what we probably don't realise is the infrastructure around the club, the facilities, I don't know. You'd rather go to a team that's got really high standards of facilities and changing rooms and stadiums or whatever than go to Burnley, who maybe don't have that sort of, or Bournemouth, who've got a 12,000-seater stadium or whatever. The prestige of these clubs sort of goes more. I guess Man City are an exclusion to this, but the other 4 clubs, Chelsea, even you could argue they don't have much of a history, but Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man United have massive histories in English football, and there's even though they have got the most money, they're still 3 of the biggest clubs in England just because of what they've achieved over the years. Before money was a factor in football, I think seeing that Man United won the very first Premier League season and are still competing at the top, that says a lot about them. And Liverpool, of course, as well, competed for many years in the top 4. Arsenal did. Newcastle were in the 90s and early 2000s, and obviously they've gone downhill. So I don't really know what the point is to what I'm saying, but I don't know. I disagree.
I think ultimately, back to the point, I just think the Super League's a dreadful idea. That's what I take from all this, because it is. We'll get to the point. It's purely about the money. It is purely about the money, because there's no regulation from any other league, any other governing body, UEFA, FIFA, FA, whatever you want to call it, and it would really hurt the football of other leagues. The way you look at it, the leagues. If you want to argue the leagues aren't great at the moment, all that the European Super League would do is muck that up even more. And even though your likes of Reals and Barca's win the leagues regularly, and all right, we'll argue that the top 4 and 5 win the Premier League regularly. Well, that's just going to happen in the European Super League. It doesn't solve that. All that does is the cream rise to the top. That's my biggest argument against the European Super League. The cream will rise to the top. It will massively damage the reputation of clubs. You'll look at, we'll take Arsenal as an example. Please don't kill me if you're an Arsenal fan. If Arsenal go into this European Super League, get battered, and they're back in the Premier League and doing stupid, it makes the Premier League the second best league in the world. Not the best league, because they've been relegated from the European Super League. That's a problem, because that just automatically says to clubs like Bournemouth, you're never going to get into that European Super League, and you're in the second best league in the world, and there's no way you can get into that. And the likes of Leicester's, they win the league, they go into this European Super League, and unfortunately, they wouldn't consistently have not the fight, but they wouldn't consistently battle in that league, I don't think. They could try, but I don't think they wouldn't. Possibly even a team like Arsenal and Spurs, and I think that, I know I got shot down for it earlier, but AC Milan aren't the team they used to be, and they would be potentially put down, and clubs like Marseille going into that would be put down potentially. And all it encourages, and this is really going to be my last point on it, because we are going round in circles, and unfortunately, until there's more that's revealed about it, there's not really much more to talk about. But the last thing I will say is that it's all about money, that having all these big teams in a league together and a pool together will encourage one to spend more than the other one then spend more than the other one, then Scooby to spend more than Daphne, and then Daphne to spend more than Scooby, and we get into a horrible battle where we have money, and it's a rich man's world, and it won't be such a rich man's world anymore because you'll have one club that prospers, and everybody else will go, and it won't work. It really, 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 really won't work. I haven't got a solution that will help the domestic leagues, but all I will say is the European Super League is not that solution.
Interesting. Yeah. There's certainly a lot of cons against this, and until we have more information of how it's going to work, we can't really say too much more about it. My argument to you saying that it'll mess up all the other leagues, I think that's the whole point of it. That the other leagues on their own can't be better, so let's make a new league where we will actually have fairly competitive football every week. But that's fair enough. I think what Paul said in the chat, the YouTube chat, he was saying it could just be the norm in 50 years' time. Just like we look at the Premier League now and the money we get in that, the transfers that are, if we said to somebody in the 90s that there'll be somebody sold for 200 million, they would think that you were completely crazy. But it's the norm now. We're used to it. It's certainly a worrying idea. I think it would, as you say, get rid of the heritage of football. What would happen to things like the FA Cup? Would teams be allowed in that? As you say, the World Cup, would players be banned from it? There's going to be a massive sort of spat between UEFA and FIFA and ESL, and
it just causes more problems than it does good. Ultimately, it might profit these teams massively, but it makes a huge headache and it's a very selfish approach. It benefits 10, 15 clubs.
I think it benefits European football, on a whole, and how I don't know the quality of football for the television, if you like. But what it does do is it hurts the bread and butter football that is, if you want to call it that is domestic football, and that's what it'll hurt ultimately. And obviously the fans are going to be affected because most fans aren't going to be able to go to away days the way that a lot of fans do at the moment. You're not going to get fans going to Barcelona every weekend. What?
Away day to Barca.
Away day to Barca, away day to Milan. You're not going to have that. And also, what happens to teams from, say, Russia, or, we haven't really alluded on this, but teams that are outside the big five leagues, Scottish Premier League even, you're not going to get the likes of Celtic beating Barcelona and stuff like that, which is another argument for it. But I think one way or another, things have to change in football, and I just don't think they will. I think they'll probably stay the same. We'll have the Premier League, the top six, until another tycoon comes in and takes over another club, or until a tycoon leaves one of the big six. We're just going to have what we have at the moment for at least the next few years, and possibly even after that, because the rich are still going to get richer whether the European Super League happens or not. The one thing we haven't talked about is what happens when the money goes away from the Premier League, when people get bored of that. What happens then?
I don't know, but people will also get bored of the European Super League in the end.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you.
It's just a turning cycle. It'd be unfortunate, really, because you could argue that if that happened, then we could have a British Super League. We can have
Cardiff Met Uni playing Celtic in the Premier League.
We can have South Shields and Celtic at the top of the table, with Hensford rounding out the top three. Yeah, that'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? If this happened, the only problem would be it would make a hell of a lot of other things happen. at the end of the day. It's a trigger for other things happening. And a British Super League that included the likes of Kilmarnock would make me cry. Because I don't deserve to be part of it. I'm sorry, Kilmarnock fans. Not there's probably any watching, but...
I mean, to be honest with you, you've disrespected enough European clubs, I think.
I don't care, I'll disrespect all. I really don't care. I disrespected Liverpool earlier, don't I? So I can even disrespect my own, but it's an interesting one. And fundamentally, until something happens, we don't know what's going to happen. We can only speculate, and to be honest, I think we both have decided, even though you've given a little bit of battle, which is much more than I've been able to do, it's a bit of a naff idea. And if it does happen...
In its current form, I think it can work, personally.
It can, yeah.
You know, I think if they amalgamated all the domestic leagues into this European Super League structure, I think it would actually be a really cool thing. But it would be a hell of a lot of work to do it. And people have done it on FM before, where they've experimented by putting all of the European teams, and I'm including Everton and the likes of Sunderland in this, by reputation, and they go into 10 divisions or something. And I think that sort of thing would be really cool. I don't know how it would work, and it would cripple clubs like Bournemouth, because they would be in Division 9 or something, and nobody would want to watch European Super League Division 9, would they? So, there you go. But an interesting debate tonight, as we have alluded to in the chat tonight, was a bit of a deep dive topic. It's something we want to do more on the podcast, because we think our strongest episodes are the ones where we go deeply into a topic and debate it, and people tell us why we're wrong in the chat. That is brilliant. We want to spark debate with this podcast. We don't want to just report the news to you. So hopefully you've enjoyed something a little bit different tonight. It's not necessarily going to last an hour. I'm going to say it probably won't. I think we are probably coming to the end of the podcast. But no, I don't know. What are your thoughts on tonight's ongoing podcast?
I think it's pretty clear that everyone in the chat, in the YouTube chat, disagrees with it. Apart from, there is one clear advantage, which we've gone over so many times, and that's the money. I'd get a £5 note out, but I'm not going to bother. It's all about the money. And it's all about the price tag and all that rubbish. I'm not going to get into singing, thank you very much. Not tonight. But there are a hell of a lot of legal barriers. I think you could even say the likes of political barriers.
Well, yeah, I mean, Theresa May was poking her nose in, wasn't she? About
Theresa May'd stop it. She'd go up and stand on the line and go, "We're leaving the customs union." That was a terrible impression, wasn't it? But we won't talk about that.
We might even get David Davis involved in it,
or even Nigel Farage. That would be good. Mind you, I don't think he'd go abroad.
Securing Britain's exit from the Champions League.
That'll be the next one. What would it be called? Chexit? No, it sounds more like checkers. Campsit? I don't know. Champit? Chompit?
Prexit for the Premier League,
Brexit. Sounds like you're pregnant. Get the plunger and get the baby out. Brexit. No, we're going too much into stupid things now. But if you're watching it back on video or on Spotify, make sure to get in touch with us on Twitter or, of course, in the YouTube comments. Let us know what your opinions are. And I'm sure if anything more is revealed about the European Super League, we will come back to it. But not for a while, I don't think. We've said all we need to say. But there is some very interesting developments to go on in the next few years in football. But before we go, let's talk about, very quickly, who's going to win the Premier League this year. Let me know in the comments in the YouTube chat. If you're on Spotify, perhaps let me know on Twitter. But we'll let you go first, Mr. Captain Goodspeed. Who's going to win the Premier League this year? Top four we'll go for.
Top four, in no particular order. I think Arsenal have shown that they'll probably get back into the... Nah. Who should I... I think Man City will probably win it.
Okay.
At the end of the season. Yeah. I think Liverpool, Chelsea and Arsenal will be the other three teams in there.
Okay. I think I've got a very funny feeling that Chelsea are going to win the league.
Possibly.
Because I feel that Chelsea every first season they have been coached, they seem to do well. And I just don't know about City. I feel like they haven't had a bad period under Guardiola, and when that comes, it depends how they'll cope. I don't want City to win the league, because I don't particularly like Guardiola, but I'd love Liverpool to win it. But I think, of course, South Shields to get promoted. That's very important. Chelsea first, City second, Liverpool third. Manchester United fourth.
Interesting.
Yeah, Manchester United. It's tricky because Arsenal are playing very well at the moment, but I feel like they might. Tottenham are going to finish sixth. They're the sixth best team in the Premier League, which is unbelievable considering what they've done in the last few years. But they've really struggled. But
I mean, we say they've struggled. Most seasons they would have actually been top three. I think that the fact is the top three have got off to better starts rather than Tottenham struggling.
Mm.
You know, I think Tottenham have actually had their best Premier League start for about 25 years or something. So,
I don't know about Tottenham, but yeah, that's my opinion. Toby's brain only goes back a year. Well, that was his first season. Yeah, but no comment.
One more thing to say about the title race while you're composing yourself. I think Man City have just got the best depth. You know, I think you look at a Liverpool, and as you're finding out in your FM save, Liverpool don't have depth. You know, Arsenal don't really have depth. Chelsea have got decent depth as well, which is why I think they'll do really well this season. It's the same with Tottenham. You know, if Harry Kane gets injured, they're screwed. You know, to say the least. And it's I don't know. Tottenham didn't recruit well over the summer, but they're going through a similar period that Arsenal did 10 years ago when they were paying for the new stadium. They didn't recruit either, so you know, we'll see. But yeah, I think that's probably where we're going to leave it for this podcast. You got anything else to say, Toby?
It's been a stressful one. It's been a very good one though. I do like the debate comments. I'm wrong sometimes, we're all wrong sometimes, but I've got my own view. Everyone does, and that's what's so brilliant about the podcast. So thank you so very much for tuning in, folks. Whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, or even in the radio in your car on Radio 2, and of course the feature us in the morning.
5 Live, Talk Sport.
Yeah, 5 Live, Talk Sport. Forget the cricket. Tuesday night lives around.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for watching, and I'll let Joe sign off because.
Yeah. So as Toby said, thank you very much for coming along tonight. It has been a really good debate with the people in the YouTube chat. If you are listening on Spotify or other platforms, make sure if you can do come along on the live streams on a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. UK time, and you can get involved in the chat as well. But yeah, it's been a good debate about the European Super League, and I'm sure that it's something that will develop or fizzle out in the next few years. We really don't know, and that's the beauty of debate. Sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen, and we could all be laughed at in a few years when we watch this back. But thank you for coming along. If you are watching it on the YouTube watch back page, then make sure you leave a like and leave your thoughts down below in the comments section, and we shall see you in a couple of weeks' time. I don't think we're on next week, are we, Toby? I think
we are. We're on.
Oh, we are. We are on next week. Don't listen to me. I thought Toby was going around a carton track. Never mind. We are back next week, and we'll be doing another probably deep dive topic because I've enjoyed it this week. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.